Hi everyone, this is Stacy, and in this video I will demonstrate how to run preliminary analyses in SPSS. Okay, so the first thing you want to do in cleaning up your data file is to actually go through and rename your variables. But to simplify the process, I've already done that for you. So you can see that these labels here sort of match the scales over here. The second step, which we'll do as practice in the lab, is to actually recode any scale items that were reverse coded. So sometimes in a measure you'll have an item that is negatively worded or worded in the opposite direction from the other items in the measure. And so before you calculate someone's scale score, you actually need to reverse code that so it's going in the right direction along with all of the other items in the measure. So the way you actually identify those and figure out what you need to do to reverse code is by, first of all, just figuring out or remembering which measures are in your study. So I've provided a little handout that has the 3 measures you'll be working with. And what you can do is just look at your data file under Label. And this is where you have the question text, and you can kind of go through and match this up with the measures here. And any items that need to be reverse coded will be labeled with an R at the end of the item. Okay? So what we see here is we have something called the gratitude questionnaire, and there are 2 items that need to be reverse coded, and that's item 3 and item 6. And let's double check our data file and make sure that those items are the same. Okay, so here we have the gratitude questionnaire, items 3, and item 6. Okay, so we need to reverse code these 2 items so that they are going in the same direction as the other items in this measure. The first thing we want to do is to look under values and figure out what kind of scale the participants used to respond to the items. So this looks like they had a scale of 1 to 7. And what we want to do is in our entire data file, we want to have SPSS for these items only. Take all the 7s and make them 1s, all the 6s, make them 2s, and so on until all the 1s and make them 7s. All right, and the way you do this is by going to transform and then recode into same variables. You can recode into a different variable, and that will just create a new variable for you that will be reverse coded. Some people like this, but I find it confusing. I prefer to just save my syntax, and then I can keep track of what I've done and if I've made any mistakes. So over here, we just identify the 2 variables that need reverse coding, and we bring those over. Okay, and then we want to click Old and New Variables, and again, we want to take all the 1s under Old Value and give those a new value of 7. Okay, I'm just going to go through and do that for all of these, and you'll see how they're getting reverse coded here. Okay, so all the 4s will remain 4s, the 5s will become 3s, 6s will become 2s, and then 7s will become 1s. All right, hit continue. And again, we want to work with syntax here because that can help us to keep track of what we've done and identify any errors. So instead of just hitting OK, which will go ahead and run this for us, we want to click Paste. And you'll see that's going to open up a syntax file, and that shows us the code that SPSS uses when running these various commands. Okay, so to run it, all you need to do is highlight it and hit the play button. All right, and this confirms for us that it did that command. Okay, so that was the first step. We've identified the measures, the items that needed to be recoded, and you can make a note of that here. Okay, the next thing we want to do is to run the alphas for each measure. Remember, the alpha is a measure of the internal consistency of each measure. So let me show you how to do that. You do that by going up to Analyze, Scale, and then Reliability Analysis. Okay, and I'm just going to do one example here for the sake of time. But let's go ahead and bring over all the items for the spiritual humility scale. Over here, okay. We want to run the alphas. We can create a label just to help us with interpreting our output. Okay, and under statistics, we want to actually request, let's look at the inner item correlations. That can be helpful. And then let's look at the descriptives for the scale if the item is deleted. And so both of these can help us identify if there are any problems with reverse coding or if there are any items that are just kind of acting funky in the measure. All right, let's hit continue. And again, paste. Let's go to our syntax file and let's go ahead and run that. Okay. So the important piece here is the Cronbox alpha, and that's 0.82, which is quite good for a scale with just 4 items. The other pieces we're interested in are this inner item correlation matrix and the item total statistics. So what you want to look for here would be any items that might have a negative sign in front of them. So that can be a clue that maybe something went wrong with reverse coding, that you accidentally reverse coded something you didn't need to, or something that did need reverse coding, you didn't do that. But everything looks pretty good here, nothing's standing out. And there also isn't an item that is just poorly correlated with all the rest of the items. That would be like a 0.1 across the board here. And then we can also look down here, the Cronbox alpha of item deleted. So for example, if you notice that the alpha went like way up over here to maybe like a 0.90, that means by removing a particular item, the Cronbox alpha shot way up, got much better, and that can tell you that maybe there's, again, some type of problem with that item in terms of coding or just in terms of its performance. But all of these look pretty much the same, so there don't appear to be any problematic items here. All right. Okay, the next step is to actually go ahead and compute your variables. So when you go to do an analysis, right now you just have individual items, and that's not very helpful. Like, we don't really care how people responded to item 1 of the spiritual humility scale. We want to know more what the full scale score is, and then look at relationships between something like spiritual humility and gratitude. So to compute a scale score, what you do is go back up to transform and go to compute variable. We'll create a name for the target variable. Let's just go ahead and call this spiritual humility. Remember, SPSS does not like spaces, so don't put those in. And then here, these are just all of our items. And these are the spiritual humility scale items. We're just going to bring those over and hit plus to add them all together. Okay, and then once you have all of your items for a particular scale brought over, go ahead and click paste. Go to your syntax file and run that. Okay, your output gives you confirmation, but what's cool now is you can also see in your data file that you have a new variable that was just created called spiritual humility. Something to look out for is it doesn't always put in the measurement type properly. So here it labeled it as nominal, but that's not right. These are scale items. So let's go ahead and change that to scale. And then you should be able to see that in your data view as well, that you have spiritual humility and you have full scale scores computed for each person. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is compute the demographic information for our sample. So things like gender, age, race, religious affiliation. And the way you do that is by going up to Analyze and Descriptive Statistics, and then Frequencies. The reason you do that instead of descriptives is because you have some nominal measures over here, and the descriptives function will just give you things like mean and standard deviation, but it doesn't tell you the percentage of people belonging to a particular category. All right, so frequencies, and let's just bring over all three of the demographic variables that we have. Okay. And notice that we do have age, which is a scale variable, and for that, something like mean and standard deviation is quite helpful and something we want to report. So let's go to statistics, and let's get the mean and the standard deviation. Hit paste, and then let's run our syntax. Okay. So here's our output. So for the first table you get, which is labeled statistics, again, this is where you'll want to read the values for any scale variables that you have in your demographic information. For us right now, that's just age. So we can read the mean and the standard deviation from here. But note that the mean and standard deviation is not meaningful for gender or race because we just sort of randomly assigned 1s to males, 2 to females, 3 to transgender. And the same thing for race. Those numbers don't mean anything. So in order to get meaningful data about those demographic variables, we go down to the frequency tables, and this is where you can actually see the frequency. So this is your N, that means there were 45 males in the study, and percent, so your sample was 41.3% male. On the other hand, the age frequency table is really not all that helpful. Like, you normally don't report the percentage of 40-year-olds in your sample, right? So we can ignore that. But again, you have race down here, and this tells you that you had 3.7% of your sample identified as American Indian or Native American, which was an N of 4. Okay. And the final thing you want to do is go ahead and request the descriptive statistics for the other variables in your study. So these are all of your measures that you included. All right, and we're interested in things like mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, kurtosis, and skew. And these are measures of normality, right? So let's go back to the data file, go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and this time we do want to go down here to descriptives. Okay, so you'll just scroll down to the bottom, and you will have computed scales for the other measures in your study. But right now we just have spiritual humility. We'll bring that over. Under options, this is what you automatically get. So you've got mean, standard deviation, min and max, which is great, but we also want these measures of normality. So go ahead and click those, hit continue, and then paste. And then run your syntax. Okay. And so now you have all of these sort of preliminary analyses for the spiritual humility scale. And you'll go ahead and do that for the other measures in your study as well. All right. So that's it. I hope you found it helpful.